So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to our today's speakers. We have Jobin Kuruvilla from Adaptavist, Head of Solution Strategy, and GitLab's Partner Solution Architect, Scott Brightwell. Jobin, if you want to start.
Yeah, definitely. My name is Jobin Kuruvilla. I'm the Head of Solution Strategy at Adaptavist. So I will be asking some questions to Scott as we go along and helping run this webinar. But obviously, Scott is going to do most of the talking. From my side, we help customers onboard on their digital transformation journey. And we are partnering with GitLab because we feel like GitLab is a tool that can do what we are trying to do for our customers. And there's a lot of value out there. Especially when we're talking about DevSecOps, there's a lot of features that GitLab has, and obviously Scott is going to talk about a few of them. And with that said, I will pass it to Scott.
Sure. Thanks, Jobin. Thanks, Vanessa. And everyone that's joined, thank you for giving us a bit of your time today. So GitLab is a platform for DevOps, and the thing that we really want to focus on today is adding security into this DevOps platform mix. And so the focus today will be on the security features of GitLab. We can't really go through everything that we do, but happy to take your questions in the Q&A and chat. We'll monitor those things, and yeah, let's get started. So security and compliance is a key aspect of making sure things are hardened, that we're removing vulnerabilities, that we're making our applications safer in this new world of cloud native. And the trick, or the real benefit, is this idea of shifting like way left. We talk about shifting left and moving security team scans and compliance scanning into the pipelines. But what we really want to talk about today is how can we move those scans very early in the commit process of creating fixes and new features, and really collaborating with developers and showing them how what they're doing is affecting the security profile of the application. And so that's really the key here, and the message overall, the theme overall for today will be uniting the developers and the security teams together so they can have one conversation around both, fixing vulnerabilities that are introduced, and the education around what security really means. And we don't want to slow things down, right? The key problem that DevOps is trying to solve, and DevSecOps is trying to solve, is going faster. The whole point of IT and the whole point of DevOps is to get changes into the production use by our customers as fast as possible. And so all software has eaten the world at this point, and business change and business initiatives are being reflected in changes to software. So we want to speed up, not slow down this process. And sometimes there's this idea of remediating and fixing security and vulnerabilities as something that slows down the process, and it doesn't have to be that way. Where we see a lot of customers today is trying to integrate a lot of point solutions into a DevSecOps pipeline and infrastructure stack. So they have a lot of tools, they're using a lot of integrations between these tools, and it creates kind of a fragile connectivity between these, and it can be expensive in terms of the time and money spent in keeping all of these interactions whole and complete through upgrades, and keeping it from being fragile. And so this is the challenge that I think GitLab is trying to solve here in the DevOps space, is removing the need for all these point solutions. There's integration absolutely where you see fit, but to pull this all together into a single DevOps platform. And that's really where the industry's going. The industry analysts are seeing the need and the emergence of DevOps platforms as the next major step in this ecosystem. So that's where GitLab comes in. We see 10 or so stages of the DevOps process, and we have feature functionality in each of those, from a single conversation around portfolio management and agile project planning, through the creation of actual commits and being the Git repo, which is what most people know us for. Packaging and securing is what we'll talk about a little bit more today, that process, and then release and configuration of production systems and the CI/CD processes that allow us to deploy. By being a single application that does this whole range of DevOps capabilities, then you get everybody in a single conversation. It's that collaboration that we offer in bringing the security teams with the developers, with the infrastructure and ops teams together in a single interface, in a single security and permissions model, to collaborate, to discuss what changes are occurring, and then to allow the platform to automatically deploy those changes into your different dev stage test and production systems. So by having one application that spans the entire process, you also get one application that you can query for analytics. So as you're doing like value stream analytics, we can create custom value streams and measure each stage along the process. And we can show executives the adoption rate of DevOps. We can show security teams, security dashboards and vulnerability dashboards. So all the analytics are in one place. And so there's not this complex integration of trying to pull analytics and timings and logs from lots of different tools in order to build up like how successful you are at being a DevOps shop. And so by removing these complex integrations, these perhaps fragile integrations, we can speed up the process of development. And ultimately, that is, again, getting software into the hands of our customers faster, which matters to revenue. Like, this is not just cost remediation. This is also revenue acceleration, getting change into the hands of our customers. And we want those changes to be highly secure. And so by bringing security teams, and I'll show you how in a second, into the conversation at the commit time, then we have a great story to tell around educating developers about good coding practices. And that ultimately creates fewer errors and a higher TCO, because we're making changes at the point of the commit. And so the outcomes ultimately, in summary, that we're trying to get to here are collaboration across teams, right? The developers, security teams, governance, etc. Going fast, but also reducing our security exposure. So we can apply pipelines and solutions and security scans across software deployments, scanning source code, and also scanning infrastructure as code. So if you're doing Terraform and Ansible or CloudFormation templates, anything like that, store those in Git and allow us to scan those as well. So we make sure that you're not leaking credentials. The ops teams are not doing anything that would be risky as well. So it's not just for developers, it's also for the ops teams. And the compliance to policy is very important, because we can apply compliance pipelines to make sure that every project has a compliant scan, if that's what you want to do. Whatever that job or task is that you want to enforce across all projects, we can have compliance pipelines that automate and provide a consistent scan set across all projects, and the developers can't sort of modify those things. That is an overlay and a governance that security and compliance teams can add to the environment. And ultimately, it's predictable costs. So it's creating an environment where you know the sort of user and subscription costs that you have. We can remediate and rationalize cost in terms of licensing, and you can have a predictable cost there. Excuse me. Ultimately, that remediation cost, speaking of cost, is less expensive the earlier we can catch security vulnerabilities. So if we don't introduce security vulnerabilities, we catch things in the requirements phase and don't include anything, then that's a normalized unit of cost. If we can catch them here in the commit, where the developer is actually focused on their activity, they've perhaps introduced a vulnerability that's been scanned and they're aware of it now, they can immediately see it, they're interacting with the system, and they can fix it right there. This is really the, practically the least cost way, time to fix vulnerabilities is right when they are introduced. And then you see this 10, 15, 30x growth of the cost to fix and remediate security vulnerabilities, because a lot of scanning tools, just prior to running in production, there's this gate in the pipeline. And we've done all of our coding, we've done our integration and test, system test, and just before we go into production, we run scans. And by waiting that far into the pipeline, what we're doing is we're allowing the developer to cut loose. They're not paying attention to what's happening anymore. They've moved on to other projects. And yet the changes they've made have introduced vulnerabilities, and we have to create issues and go back to the development cycle and re-engage those teams in order to fix vulnerabilities prior to production. So it really does matter how quickly we identify the vulnerabilities and begin to remediate. So how do we do that? Let me go back to this and just say, one of the problems we have for the cost of doing security scanning is one of the most expensive things we do, right? The tools in the security space can be very expensive. And a lot of them will do scans on things like number of lines of code scanned, okay? And so if that's your cost metric, if that's your subscription, then you don't really want to scan your code on every commit, because people are making commits very rapidly in this inner loop of development. I do something, I commit my code. If I do the scans at that point, then I'm scanning the same code over and over and over, and my cost for security scanning is going up. And so that's actually why a lot of teams will push the security scans later in the process, where the rate of change is slower, and they can make fewer security scans across the code base as possible. Still doing them, but doing them later in the process. And so, from a subscription point of view, that's one of the things that GitLab offers is our subscription, either premium or ultimate, is based on number of users. And so you can scan systems as much as you want to, and it's not increasing your cost. It's just the number of developer users, project manager users, et cetera, in the system. And so we want you to use our product, and we're not penalizing you from a financial point of view for using our product to its fullest extent. And so we can scan all the code all the time. So at every commit, how do we make this more efficient? We don't want to repeat scans. When we do a commit, we actually are the Git repo. And so we can scan just the changes, right? It's very efficient. At the same time, when things do progress into later stages of the pipeline, we begin to scan more and more of the complete system again to make sure that it's been scanned before, but nothing is being introduced that we didn't catch earlier in the process. And so we can scan all the commits, every commit, and show developers what those vulnerabilities are very early. So there's no additional cost penalty for that. And then because the scans are built in, the merge request view, the point of view of the developer, they see the results of the scans right there in their field of vision. In the one tool they're using for commits and changes, they're seeing the results in the security scans right there in their merge request. So it's fewer tools. They're not having to context switch between tools. And then in the merge request, since all the commit history is there, all the security scans are there, the vulnerabilities, the pipeline success, failure, etc., then the security teams can come in to that merge request and begin to collaborate with the developers to create issues, to resolve bugs that have been, or vulnerabilities that have been introduced, and begin to have a real conversation about security, best practices. Security is not just a gating factor at the end of the process. They're actually collaborative, beneficent, right? Enabler, allowing developers to say yes, not just no, to changes. So it really matters that you get this collaborative effort, and ultimately compliance audit. Every change, every vulnerability is tracked. Compliance pipelines are run across with, every project that the developers don't even have the capability of changing those pipelines. And so, everybody's on the same page and everybody can see what's going on. So to get there, I've kind of talked about these, but we want all these integrations in the developer point of view and the developer user interface. And optionally for any environment, we absolutely don't need to replace everything. We have capabilities across the DevSecOps ecosystem, all stages. We have some lovable, acceptable, sometimes nascent functionality in some of these DevOps stages, and that's fine. We're growing, just like every company. So if there are tools or applications, some kind of tool that you really do rely on and you don't want to lose, even if you are looking at a platform like GitLab, then absolutely we can integrate with those. We integrate with everybody and everything. That's one of our strong suits, is the ease in which we can incorporate other tools in our pipelines and things like that. So we're not trying to boil the ocean, but we do have very capable functionality in each of these stages. So as we're doing scans, like what is it that we're scanning for? So very typically static application, basically scanning the code based on the language framework that you're using. We auto detect these things, and checking binaries and things like that you've put into the repo for vulnerabilities. Dependency scanning, that's another thing. So if you're using other dependencies that you're not authoring, we can walk that tree and look for known vulnerabilities in those external dependencies. That's where in other systems you'll see a software bill of material. That's that dependency tree that we're building there. Both in the software development world, the application world, as well as infrastructure as code, you're doing GitOps and you're doing scripts or other things, Terraform manifest, that sort of thing. Secret detection is always key. So we check for all kinds of secrets and credentials across, as I said, both the app side of things and your source code, as well as infrastructure as code. So none of the teams are leaking credentials out into the project. Then and so once the project is built, we take the source code and we can automate the process of building a container for you. Through our process of auto DevOps, we can actually detect the language framework you're using and automatically build a container. We are actually the container registry as well. So you can use an external container registry, but we offer a container registry as well. So we can do container scanning once the container is built, looking for vulnerabilities. Ultimately, if you build a container, you're using a base image, so there may be vulnerabilities that exist in those containers. License compliance is always key, making sure that you're not out of compliance of open source licenses that you want to avoid using in your environment. And then the rest, dynamic security testing, cloud native and fuzz testing, these can't really happen unless you have a running application. And so one of the key capabilities that GitLab offers is to be able, especially in a cloud native world, Kubernetes world, web application world, we can automatically produce and deploy what's called a review app. And so your application is containerized. It can be deployed to like a staging Kubernetes cluster. And then per feature branch, you have your own copy of the application up and running to see your review app, your feature having been implemented. And so it's at that point we can do dynamic security testing. We can explore the API that you've created and you're offering to your users. We can do fuzz testing and kind of explore the edges of malformed requests and things like that, and make sure that not only from a static source code point of view, but also a dynamic point of view, the application, no vulnerabilities are able to be discovered. So it's a really comprehensive stack of security and testing frameworks. And then all the vulnerabilities that are detected are there immediately in the merge request. So the developer sees the impact of what they're doing immediately before any approvals happen, before any next stages of pushing to production. So really a key capability there. So let me, it's important to just sort of see visually how this works. A lot of the security scans that we've talked about are here at the end of the pipelines, and we will still do a comprehensive security scan at the end of a pipeline. But as I said, just to give you a visual, as an issue is created, a merge request is created, and a feature branch is created of whatever change you're making, here, as the developer is committing their changes, we have CI pipelines running and security scans running all the time. And so we're moving the security testing as close to the developer as possible, and they begin to see what the impact is of their changes. As I said, we have the review apps, and it's here in the merge request that we can discuss and collaborate and have comments back and forth. And you see the whole history of change and collaboration and comment right there in the merge request. Mandatory approvals. So we can enable mandatory approvals, group approvals. The people who committed the code are not allowed to approve the code to go into production. So we can have groups of approvals, randomized round robin type approval settings, all kinds of gamification that we can do there. But ultimately, having a team like security has to be part of the team who approves. Peer review has to be part of the team who approves, right? The security sort of developer, software development architect, senior developer has to be part of who approves changes. And so right here, the developer can't sort of disconnect and move on to something else until the security team, let's say, approves the changes and sees the impact of what they do. And once those approvals happen, the merge is accepted, the issue is closed, overall pipelines run again to make sure that integration and production systems are automatically deployed. So yeah, it really is a key capability of putting all of this feature functionality and this collaboration very early in the process. And that's what separates us from a lot of our competitors. How easy is it to deploy? Well, all of our pipelines are pipelines as code. The pipeline itself, the definition of the pipeline, is sitting in the repo. And so all we have to do is simply say include template security dependency scanning. We don't have to modify this. It's just a reference. This is the entire thing. And once we include these templates in our base pipeline, then all of the security scans that we want to have running come into play. So it's very easy. Languages are automatically detected. Containers can be automatically built, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very easy to implement and bring this collaboration together in one view. Security dashboard is a good feature that, again, on this focus on collaboration, brings both the developer and the security teams together. This is one where, you know, a security professional can look across the organization, across the projects, either to you know, a high-level group or within individual projects, and see, here are the vulnerabilities that are out there. The security teams don't need to manage down inside each project. That would be unwieldy. And so the vulnerabilities are also passed up into a security dashboard view. They can go to one place, see sort of all the security vulnerabilities reporting and bubbling up to them, and they can drill down as they need to monitor and go take action, and drill down into a particular project and begin collaborating with the developer there. And so you can see, you know, statistics on vulnerabilities over time and reducing vulnerabilities over time. Again, with value stream analytics, you could customize the creation of the analytics on how quickly do we remediate vulnerabilities, that sort of thing. And so we can metric this whole thing and really show a benefit to the collaboration and the leveraging of the tools that we have at GitLab. And it's, you know, it is the source code that we're protecting, but it's also the infrastructure. It's also the tool itself. And so GitLab, all you have to do is search, you know, do a Google site search for gitlab.gov, and you'll see the myriad of GitLab deployments that are out there and available and running in the US federal government and other governments around the world. So it's a very hardened, very compliant system in and of itself. Can be deployed in the cloud. It can be deployed. GitLab.com as a SaaS solution, can be deployed on premise, wherever you want to deploy and harden that system, it can be deployed there. And then, you know, changes. It used to be good, fast, cheap, pick any two. Like when I was in computer science school, that was the mantra. Now it's just fast, fast, fast. So if I can very quickly remediate bugs or add features, I can get to good very quickly if I just get started, right? If I get started and I can change fast enough, then I can get to good. I can remediate vulnerabilities, prevent, as I've been saying, vulnerabilities from being introduced in the first place. And then if we can get to our customers quickly enough, then we're actually building and generating revenue faster than we were before. So it's fast, fast, fast. There's a lot of standards out there in security, and we don't want to compromise the speed to which we go to market, which we don't have to do. It's a very compliant system, and the process is compliant as well. So you can define the rules and automation. There's audit of the entire system, right? There's commit histories of everything. Being one application, we can see all the analytics and make the auditors happy about the security and compliance and permissions and who has access to what systems. And then ultimately this builds up into software supply chain security. It's kind of one of the big buzzwords that's happening right now, is the tool you're using a compliant tool? Yes, GitLab is. Are you building compliant applications? Yes, I can prove it because the compliance pipelines are being run across everything, and the scans are showing that, you know, no vulnerabilities or only low risk vulnerabilities are getting through. Are we able to show permissions and, you know, only certain people have access into the system? Yes, we're able to show that because everything that goes into the system has to be committed in a merge request, has to be approved by these people. So it's a very compliant and secure system overall that we can build together with you. And there's a lot of, industry customers out there like you using this tool. It's not just us. So we have successes where we've been able to do sort of license rationalization and reduce the number of tools. Absolutely being able to improve the speed to market. And then this ability to do sort of unlimited scanning, scan what you want, when you want, anytime you want to. And it really allows you to shift left the scans into the hands of the developer. BI worldwide, 10x daily deployments while using the security features, right? They adopted GitLab for the security features of GitLab, and they have a 10x increase in their velocity and pace of deployment. HackerOne is, from a security point of view, HackerOne is a great example where they're doing faster pipelines, faster deployment, leveraging the security tools and aspects of this, and making sure that as a name brand and even in the hacker community, they are writing secure code and not introducing vulnerabilities that they might actually be a target for. And that's the sort of end of my slides. I feel like we time flies when you're having fun. Are there any questions or comments from participants? Jobin?
I can start with one of the questions that I had, right? So I think you partially probably answered it in your presentation. Now, security tools seems to be the most expensive tools in the DevOps stack, right?
Mm-hmm.
What makes scanning, finding, fixing vulnerabilities so expensive? Is there any reason behind the cost involved with it? Even if you take GitLab, you can see the difference in pricing between premium and ultimate. And of course, security comes in at a cost, right?
Yeah, so the way GitLab, so there's two aspects of that, just kind of review. One is the license itself and how the customer is charged for the functionality. So in GitLab, we have premium and ultimate subscription levels. Ultimate gets you everything, including security and portfolio management, agile portfolio management, and compliance and everything. But that's on a per user basis. And so if you have no matter how big your team is, right, it's a fixed and known cost because we're charging based on the number of users. It's not a usage fee. It's a fixed, rationalized number of users cost. And so a lot of security tools out there do charge based on number of lines scanned. And so if you scan 1,000 lines of code 10 times, then that's 10,000 lines of code. And the variability of that cost sometimes shocks customers. And that's why it reintroduces a bad practice of limiting the number of scans they do, because they want to limit their cost, because it's a per usage cost, a lot like the public cloud, right? And then it's just what's the opposite of a virtuous cycle, right? It's a detrimental cycle, because now you're not scanning as often. You're waiting till later in your process to actually do security scans. The security team becomes less collaborative and just a gating factor to get to production. All they can do is say no. And then the developer, as I showed, does not have the point of view to go back and fix the vulnerabilities that they've introduced right there. They've already disconnected and moved on to something else. So scanning early, not having a usage-based scan financial model, both contribute to that.
So this also goes back to the point that you were making earlier about predictable costs. So with GitLab, you're getting the predictable costs, whereas with many other tools, and there is this other problems about you can only scan so many lines of code with the costs that they promised you.
Right.
Okay. All right, sounds good. There's actually one question from the audience. So are there any difference in capabilities between the on-prem version versus GitLab.com, or is it the same thing?
No, it's the same code base. So whether you're using our SaaS capability, our SaaS model of GitLab.com, the alternative to that we call self-hosted. Now you can self-host on the public cloud. It's basically a deployment of GitLab that you control in the public cloud, or you can deploy GitLab on, VMs or bare metal within the data center itself on premise. No matter how you deploy, it is the same code base. When we install GitLab.com, we are actually leveraging the installer, just like our customers would for self-hosted. So yeah, it's the same code base. So you get all the capabilities no matter how you've deployed. And that's a key capability. So you don't have to be in the cloud in order to enjoy all these capabilities. And you don't have to be deploying cloud native applications to be securely scanning and remediating vulnerabilities that get introduced. So we're not beholden to cloud native practices. If you're doing, creating monoliths and I don't want to say legacy style, but old school model of deployments on VMs, you don't need to go to Kubernetes and cloud native. Great, right? We're still doing all the scans of vulnerability testing for you in those environments as well.
So you mentioned about a lot of integrations with GitLab, right? Would that make any difference if you're on-prem versus SaaS? I mean, of course, you mentioned that it's the same core product that you have on SaaS as well as on-prem if you're installing it there. Mm-hmm. But will the integration become any harder if you're on-prem versus, if you're on GitLab.com?
The only got you on GitLab.com is a little bit more limited user access, like OAuth model of credentialed access for users. If that comes into play, that's the only thing really that matters for integration. Ultimately, you're a tenant in a GitLab instance, so you don't have the admin panel on GitLab.com. So we are the admins for you, and so if there's anything there, that would be the difference. But generally, no. And I didn't talk about GitLab runners, but it's a real architectural differentiation for us. This concept of a GitLab runner is the machine that actually runs all your pipelines. And because something has to actually be the executor of the pipeline, the bash script, the Docker container, whatever it is that's actually running your build job or your security scan, that sort of thing. And so these runners you can deploy on-prem. So even if you're using GitLab.com, you can deploy your own runners on premise on your, if you have sunk cost of infrastructure that you want to consume, you can deploy your runners on premise. You can deploy them in the public cloud, and that those jobs that really constitute the workload of a GitLab implementation can be moved or isolated or distributed across clouds, on premise, wherever is the most cost effective or functionally effective place for those jobs to run. And so what I'm getting at in terms of answering your question with integration is, if you have these external software that you need to integrate with, we can deploy the GitLab runner into an environment near wherever these external tools are, and then execute against and import the results from these external tools into the merge request, that sort of thing. So a rich capability of integration.
Yeah, that's a smart way of doing things. So basically you can have a hybrid architecture in terms of where the runners are, and then use it wisely to probably integrate with the other tools that you have.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter where you install GitLab or leverage the SaaS offering. You can deploy runners into the environment where you're going to be deploying your applications. So your runner on AWS, if you want to deploy your applications onto AWS, and thereby you're let's say your GitLab instance on premise can absolutely deploy applications to the public cloud wherever. Yep.
Sounds good. I do see another question come in. It's a cheeky question if you ask me. So what is the confidence level on using GitLab security features? Are we taking any shortcuts by using GitLab? It is too good to be true when you say that GitLab can replace all these other tools and save us so much money, effort, whatnot. So yeah, I will leave it to you.
The sales guy says it's great and it sounds too good to be true.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we're leveraging, we are an open source core company, and we add features and functionality to the open source GitLab. And so we both contribute to open source and leverage open source within our product. And so a lot of the tools we use for compliance and security are the open source versions of other proprietary tools, or like we didn't author all of these security scanners. We leverage, Trivy and Gripe and Kix and other things and all the language frameworks, Gymnasium and for dependency scans, etc. Like we're pulling from the ecosystem to leverage these tools within our product. If there's a tool that, and I would say for the most part, for 80%, the typical 80-20 rule, for 80% of the customers out there, that is perfectly fine. That is sufficient. There are customers in the financial sector, government sector, where either they are dependent on a particular tool, or they are mandated to also scan with a second tool from a security and compliance point of view. Great. Leverage GitLab for everything you can leverage it for. If you need to add a subscription for another tool, fine, right? We're happy to integrate and pull those results in as well. So we have as I said, we have a rich integration and ecosystem. So we're not afraid of your need to use a specific tool, but we would encourage you to explore everything that GitLab has to offer. And this is where we begin to remove cost from an environment. If you can leverage our tool set and it meets your needs, fantastic. If it doesn't meet your needs today, wait 6 months, because we release monthly on the 22nd of every month. And what you need, you can make feature requests, you can ask for more, you can contribute yourself to the product, because we're fundamentally an open source ecosystem. So there's a lot of ways to meet your needs, and sometimes we need to integrate with external tools. That's fine.
Got it. Yeah, and I must say that it's not just a sales guy who says this, because experts at Adaptavist also thinks the same, and that's the reason why we are a partner with GitLab, and so many other companies are partnered with GitLab. So definitely makes sense. You mentioned about using many language frameworks. How hard is it to implement security on the different language frameworks, and who takes responsibility when it comes to that? Is it the DevOps teams, or is it the security teams? How does it actually work?
So the creation of the pipeline that actually implements the security scan is probably, authoring that is probably the DevOps team, right? If you have a platform engineering team, a DevOps team, whoever's responsible for those pipelines and making sure they run, it's probably not just the developers. It needs to be a true DevOps unified team to enable it. But I showed you earlier on, it's really just including some templates into your CI pipeline. It's not difficult at all to implement these scans. And then because of, well, we basically support every popular language framework. And so the dependency, or excuse me, not just the dependency scans, but all the scans can automatically detect what languages you're using. So there's no specific customization needed unless you need specific customization to make any of these different languages and frameworks work. So we auto detect the language. We'll go ahead and use the appropriate tool for that language in order to do the security scans. probably the DevOps team is who authors the pipeline. But then so who is responsible is kind of an interesting question, because who's responsible for fixing the vulnerabilities that are introduced, right? Ultimately, it's the developer with the advice and consultation of the security team. So we're creating this collaborative environment. Like, oh my gosh, we're actually creating an environment where it's one multifaceted team, DevSecOps, right? It's like the name of the whole ecosystem. We're actually enabling that. And so, yeah, some developers, security professionals, operations team, all in one user interface, making change happen faster and getting software into the hands of your customers as fast as possible. That's it.
I can definitely see how that works from a tool perspective, right? But from a process perspective, how does that work in reality? I mean, do you see security teams being part of the agile teams, or is this where the cross-functional teams come into play?
There are typically not enough security professionals to embed a security person into all of the different teams, especially in a large environment. So what I typically see is sort of a security tiger team, like monitoring like the security vulnerability dashboard across projects, getting involved where they need, being on call for a developer to reach out and say, hey, I need to pass my merge request approval. I've got these vulnerabilities. I'm not sure how to fix them. Can you come in and talk to me about how we can make this happen, or I could do something in a different way to avoid the vulnerability, or whatever it is. So I typically see a smaller security team, more of a consultative team, because there's typically not enough security professionals to go around.
Yep, perfectly makes sense. I see one last question. Speaking about the dashboards, are these security dashboards configurable? Probably means that, am I able to see the things that I would like to see, rather than, seeing the vulnerabilities in the last month or 3 months or 6 months?
Yeah, there is, I'll be honest here, a limited amount of configurability in terms of the views that you want to see, and certainly the timing and the nature of vulnerabilities, the different groups that you want to zero into. Certainly that is configurable. There are epics out there, feature requests right now for having really per user composable views, where any of these dashboards, my user, I want to see these things in these areas of the screen, that sort of thing. So we're kind of headed there. And there's a limited amount of configurability right now.
All right, that makes sense. I don't see any more questions, and I think we are almost at the top of the hour.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's everything that we have for now. Vanessa, I think probably that's a wrap. But I would like to extend my thanks to Scott for walking us through the security features in GitLab and explaining the concepts. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Jobin. Yep.
Yeah, thank you both for doing that. It was a great talk, and thank you for everyone that joined. We'll be sending, like I said at the beginning, we'll be sending the recording out after with the slides as well, so you'll get to recap it all. But thank you, and thanks guys for taking part.
I think enjoy the lunch and beverages, right?
I know,
yeah,
right?
That's it. Yeah, enjoying the food.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you.